My daughter blocked me for 8 years after choosing her mother in our divorce, then suddenly came back asking for her dead grandmother's inheritance, so I pretended there was no money and watched her true colors explode. I'm a 51-year-old man, and I'm finally ready to share what happened to me 8 years ago and how it all came full circle recently in the most devastating way possible. This story involves betrayal, manipulation, and the kind of family drama that destroys relationships forever. 8 years ago, my world completely fell apart when my wife of 22 years, Linda, and I got divorced. But the worst part wasn't losing my marriage, it was losing my daughter Emma, who was 25 at the time. She immediately chose her mother's side without ever asking to hear my version of events, blocked me on everything, and essentially erased me from her life overnight. I need to give you some background to understand how painful this was for me. I'm a mechanic who owns my own auto repair shop, and I've worked my entire adult life to provide for my family. Linda was a local news anchor who became somewhat of a celebrity in our mid-sized city. While she was building her media career and attending social events, I was the one who got up at 5 a.m. to make Emma breakfast, drove her to school every day, and never missed a single soccer game or school play, even when I had to close the shop early. Emma was everything to me. After Linda and I struggled with infertility for years, Emma's birth felt like a miracle. I was probably what you'd call a girl dad. I learned to braid her hair, took her camping every summer, and we had this tradition where we'd go to the hardware store together every Saturday morning and she'd help me pick out tools. Even as a teenager, she'd still come to the shop after school and do her homework in my office while I worked on cars. The divorce destroyed all of that in a matter of weeks. When everything fell apart, Linda used her media connections and public persona to completely destroy my reputation in our community. She painted me as an absent, neglectful husband and father who cared more about grease and carburetors than his family. The local newspaper even ran a subtle hit piece about workaholic fathers that was clearly aimed at me, written by one of Linda's journalist friends. But Emma never once asked for my side of the story. She just accepted everything her mother told her and cut me off completely. I tried calling, texting, showing up at her apartment. Nothing worked. She had made up her mind that I was the villain, and Linda threatened to sue me for harassment if I didn't stop trying to contact Emma. So I stopped. I spent the next 8 years throwing myself into my work, taking care of my elderly mother who had been diagnosed with dementia, and trying to rebuild a life that felt hollow without my daughter in it. I dated a few women casually, but I could never fully trust anyone again after Linda's betrayal. The loneliness was crushing, especially during holidays and Emma's birthday, when I'd wonder what she was doing and whether she ever thought about me. My mother passed away 4 months ago after a long battle with Alzheimer's. She had been asking about Emma right up until the end, wondering why her granddaughter never visited anymore. I had to lie and tell her that Emma was just busy with work. Breaking that news to my mother over and over again as her memory faded was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I was handling my grief alone, like I've handled everything else for the past 8 years, when something completely unexpected happened last month. I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Hi, this is Emma." I nearly dropped the phone. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 8 years, and for a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating. She sounded so different, more mature, more professional, that I barely recognized her. "I saw on social media that Grandma passed away," she said. "I wanted to call and see how you're doing." I was shocked that she had been keeping tabs on me online, since she had blocked me everywhere. I managed to tell her that I was managing the grief okay, and that I had missed her terribly. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, and when she suggested meeting in person to catch up properly, I immediately agreed. I spent the entire week before our meeting cleaning my house and planning what I would cook for dinner. I was nervous and excited and hopeful in a way I hadn't been in years. Maybe, I thought, she had finally matured enough to understand that divorces are complicated and that maybe her mother hadn't told her the whole truth. When Emma showed up at my door, I barely recognized her. She was no longer the fresh-faced college graduate I remembered, but a polished, put-together woman in her 30s wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that definitely didn't come from a retail job. She looked successful and confident, and I felt proud of what she had apparently accomplished in the years we'd been apart. We spent the first couple of hours catching up on the basics. She told me she was working as a marketing manager for a pharmaceutical company, living in a downtown condo, and had gotten engaged 6 months ago to a guy named Ryan who worked in finance. I told her about my business, how it expanded to a second location, and about taking care of her grandmother during her illness. It felt surreal but wonderful to be talking to my daughter again. Even though there was some awkwardness, I could feel myself relaxing into the conversation and remembering all the reasons I'd loved spending time with her when she was younger. After dinner, we finally addressed what had happened 8 years ago. "I've been thinking a lot about the divorce," Emma said. "I was probably too young to understand how complicated it all was. Mom made everything sound pretty black and white, and I guess I just took her word for it without really thinking things through." I felt a surge of hope. This was what I had been waiting to hear for 8 years, some acknowledgement that maybe she had been too quick to judge me. "I tried to reach out to you so many times," I told her. "I wanted to explain my side of what happened, but you had already made up your mind." "I know," she said, looking uncomfortable. "I regret that now. I should have at least listened to what you had to say." We talked for another hour about the divorce, about how I had felt abandoned and misunderstood, about how much I had missed her. Emma seemed genuinely remorseful, and I started to believe that maybe we could actually rebuild our relationship. Then she dropped the bomb that shattered everything. "Dad, I need to ask you something," she said, suddenly looking nervous. "When Grandma passed away, I was expecting to hear from lawyers about her will. I know she had quite a bit of money from Grandpa's business, and she always told me that I would inherit everything as her only grandchild. But no one has contacted me, and I was wondering if you knew anything about that." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying, Emma?" "Well, I'm getting married in 6 months, and Ryan and I are trying to buy a house. We were counting on Grandma's inheritance to help with the down payment and wedding expenses. I know it might sound mercenary, but she always promised me that money, and we've already made some financial commitments based on that expectation." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. After 8 years of silence, my daughter had reached out to me not because she missed me or wanted to reconcile, but because she wanted money. "So you're telling me," I said slowly, "that the reason you called me after all this time is because you want your inheritance?" Emma looked panicked. No, that's not the only reason. I really did want to reconnect with you, especially after Grandma died. But yes, the inheritance is also important to us right now. I could see right through her. The timing was too convenient, the conversation too calculated. She had probably been planning this approach for months, waiting for what she thought was an appropriate amount of time after the funeral to make her move. How much are you expecting? I asked. She named a figure that was actually pretty close to the real amount, which told me she had been thinking about this for a long time. My mother had indeed left a substantial inheritance, my grandfather had owned a successful accounting firm, and my grandmother had been a real estate investor who bought several properties in what became prime downtown locations. Between the business sale and the property values, my mother had died a wealthy woman. But here's the thing Emma didn't know, my mother had changed her will 3 years after the divorce. Initially, she had planned to leave everything to Emma, since she was the only grandchild and my mother adored her. But after Emma cut off all contact with our family and refused to visit even when my mother was diagnosed with dementia, my mother had come to me in tears. She doesn't even call to ask about me, my mother had said. I know you and Linda got divorced, but I never did anything to hurt Emma. Why is she punishing me for your marriage problems? My mother changed her will to leave everything to me, with the understanding that I would take care of Emma if she ever came back into our lives. But legally, the money was mine, and Emma had no claim to any of it. I decided to test my daughter's true motivations, but there is no inheritance, I lied. Grandma had to use most of her money for medical expenses during her illness, and what was left went to paying off her debts. There's nothing for anyone to inherit. The look of devastation that crossed Emma's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't disappointment about a nice surprise that didn't materialize, this was the look of someone whose entire plan had just fallen apart. Are you sure? She asked desperately. I mean, I know she had those rental properties downtown, and Grandpa's business was worth a lot when he sold it. I'm sure, I said firmly. But I'd be happy to help you out with your wedding expenses from my own savings. I could probably give you $5,000 or $6,000. Emma looked like she wanted to cry. That's generous, Dad, but we were really counting on a lot more than that. Are you absolutely certain there's no money left? Maybe it's in an account you don't know about? That's when I knew for certain that she didn't care about rebuilding our relationship. She cared about money, period. I'm certain, I repeated. I'm sorry your financial plans didn't work out, but that's the reality. Emma's demeanor changed completely. The warm, remorseful daughter who had been apologizing for the past 8 years disappeared, and in her place was someone cold and calculating. I can't believe this, she said angrily. Do you know how much money Ryan and I have already spent on deposits for the wedding and the house? We made those commitments because Grandma promised me that inheritance. Emma, you haven't spoken to your grandmother in 8 years, I pointed out. How could she have promised you anything recently? She promised me when I was younger, before the divorce, Emma snapped. She always said I would get everything because I was her only grandchild. It's not fair that medical bills ate up everything that should have been mine. I stared at my daughter in shock. Should have been yours? Emma, you abandoned your grandmother when she needed you most. You never called her, never visited her, never even sent a card. Why do you think you deserve anything from her? That's when Emma showed me exactly who she had become. Because I'm her granddaughter, she yelled. I shouldn't have to beg for what's rightfully mine just because you turned me against you during the divorce. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. What's so funny? Emma demanded. Emma, if you hadn't blocked me 8 years ago, you would have gotten that inheritance, I said, still chuckling. In fact, if you unblock my old number right now, you can see all the messages I sent you that never got delivered. She looked confused and suspicious, but she pulled out her phone and unblocked my number. Within seconds, her phone started buzzing with years' worth of text messages that had been held in limbo. I watched her face change as she scrolled through message after message. Texts about family gatherings she had missed. Updates about her grandmother's health. Photos of birthday cakes I had made for her even though she wasn't there to eat them. And most importantly, several messages from 3 years ago when my mother was changing her will. Dad, I'm so worried about Mom, one message read. She wants to change her will because Emma won't return her calls. She's heartbroken that Emma has shut us both out. She's talking about leaving everything to me instead, but I know she'd rather Emma inherit it. Could you please ask Emma to at least call her grandmother? Another message, Mom changed her will today. She left everything to me. She said if Emma doesn't want to be part of our family, then she doesn't deserve the family money. I'm heartbroken about this whole situation. And then, Mom has been asking for Emma every day since her Alzheimer's got worse. She doesn't remember that Emma cut us off. She just knows her granddaughter never visits. It's breaking my heart to watch her wait for someone who's never coming. Emma read through every message, her face getting paler with each one. When she finally looked up at me, I could see the moment she realized what she had lost. She left everything to you? Emma whispered. 3 years ago, I confirmed. Because her granddaughter had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with our family. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing what she had learned. When she finally spoke, I thought she might apologize or express some remorse for missing out on a relationship with her grandmother. Instead, she said, this is ridiculous. Grandma was sick when she changed that will. She wasn't thinking clearly because of the Alzheimer's. That inheritance should still be mine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma, she changed the will 3 years before she died, when her mind was still sharp. And she changed it because you had spent 5 years ignoring her. I was young and confused about the divorce. Emma protested. I didn't know how to handle the situation with you and Mom. Grandma should have understood that. She tried to understand, I said, my patience finally running out. She called you, she sent you cards, she asked me to reach out to you on her behalf. You ignored all of it. You chose to punish an innocent old woman because you were mad at me. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but not the kind of tears that come from remorse. These were angry, frustrated tears. So what, you're just going to keep all the money out of spite? She demanded. You're going to punish me forever for mistakes I made when I was in my 20s? I'm not punishing you, Emma. I'm respecting your grandmother's wishes. She left the money to someone who actually cared about her in her final years. This isn't over, Emma said, standing up abruptly. That money belongs to me, and everyone knows it. Grandma always intended for me to have it. Maybe she did, originally, I agreed. But then you spent 8 years proving that you didn't deserve it. Emma gathered her purse and headed toward the door. Before she left, she turned around and said something that proved I'd made the right decision about everything. You know what? Mom was right about you. You are selfish and vindictive. I'm glad you've been alone all these years, because this is exactly what you deserve. And then she left, slamming the door behind her. I sat in my living room for a long time after she left, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because I had briefly hoped that my daughter had grown up and wanted to repair our relationship. Relief because now I knew exactly where I stood and could stop hoping for something that was never going to happen. Update 1. I wasn't planning to post an update, but something happened that I need to share because it's just too unbelievable. A week after Emma stormed out of my house, I got another unexpected visitor, Linda, my ex-wife. I hadn't seen her in person since our divorce was finalized 8 years ago, and it was jarring to see her standing on my doorstep. She looked older, obviously, but still put together in that polished way that it always made me feel underdressed. She was wearing the kind of expensive outfit that probably cost more than most people make in a week. Hello, Marcus, she said, as if 8 years hadn't passed since we'd spoken. Could we talk for a few minutes? I was curious enough to let her in, though I kept the conversation in the living room near the front door. I didn't want her to get comfortable. Emma told me about her visit, Linda said without preamble. And about the inheritance situation. Of course she did, I replied. Let me guess, you're here to advocate for our daughter's financial interests. Linda had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I know this is awkward, Marcus, but I think you're being unfair to Emma. She was very young when we got divorced, and she was dealing with a lot of emotional trauma. You can't hold her childhood mistakes against her forever. Childhood mistakes? I repeated. Linda, she was 25 when she cut me off. That's not a child, that's an adult who made a conscious choice to believe the worst about me without ever asking for my side of the story. She was protecting herself, Linda insisted. The divorce was traumatic for her, and she felt like she had to choose sides. She didn't have to choose sides, I said firmly. She chose to choose sides. And she chose to reject not just me, but her grandmother too. An innocent woman who never did anything but love her. Linda shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know Emma handled things poorly. But that inheritance was always meant for her. Your mother told her multiple times when she was growing up that she would inherit everything. It's not fair to change the rules now just because Emma made some mistakes in her 20s. My mother changed her will because her granddaughter abandoned her, I said. Emma didn't just make mistakes, Linda. She made choices. And choices have consequences. You have more money than you could ever spend, Linda pressed. What are you going to do with all of it? You live modestly, you don't have expensive hobbies, you don't travel. Why not give Emma what she was always supposed to get? Because she doesn't deserve it, I said bluntly. And because my mother made it very clear that she didn't want Emma to have it after Emma rejected our entire family. Linda was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that revealed exactly why she was really there. Emma and Ryan are in a difficult financial situation, she admitted. They've made some investments and commitments based on the expectation of that inheritance. If they don't get that money, they might lose their house deposit and have to cancel their wedding. There it was. This wasn't about what was fair or what my mother would have wanted. This was about the fact that Emma and her fiancé had spent money they didn't have, banking on an inheritance that Emma had no legal right to claim. That sounds like poor financial planning, I said. Maybe Emma should have maintained a relationship with her grandmother instead of assuming she'd get money from someone she ignored for years. Linda's professional composure started to crack. You're really going to destroy your daughter's future over this? I'm not destroying anything, I replied. Emma destroyed her own relationship with her grandmother, and now she's dealing with the consequences of that choice. I'm just respecting my mother's final wishes. Linda left shortly after that, but not before making it clear that she thought I was being vindictive and cruel. She said Emma was devastated and that I was ruining her life by keeping money that rightfully belonged to her. What struck me most about the conversation was that neither Linda nor Emma seemed to understand that the inheritance wasn't about money, it was about relationships. My mother didn't change her will to punish Emma, she changed it because she realized that Emma had no interest in being part of our family. Update 2. 3 days ago, I got a phone call that I definitely wasn't expecting. It was Emma, and she sounded completely different from when she had stormed out of my house. Dad, she said, and her voice was shaky, like she had been crying. I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened, and I owe you a huge apology. I was immediately suspicious, given how our last conversation had ended, but I decided to hear her out. I realize now that I handled everything wrong, she continued. When I was younger, I was so angry about the divorce that I took Mom's side without even considering that there might be another perspective. And then when years went by, I was too proud and embarrassed to reach out and apologize. This sounded more promising than anything she had said during her previous visit. I've been reading through all those text messages you sent, Emma said. Seeing how much you tried to reach out to me, how worried you were about Grandma, how much you wanted me to be part of her life. I feel terrible about all the time I wasted being stubborn. She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. I know I don't deserve forgiveness after everything I've done, she said. But if you're willing to give me another chance, I'd really like to try to rebuild our relationship. And I'd be honored if you would come to my wedding. I was stunned. This was such a complete turnaround from her previous attitude that I didn't know how to respond. Are you sure about this, Emma? I asked. Because I got the impression last time that you were only interested in talking to me about money. I know that's how it seemed, she said. And I'm ashamed of that. The inheritance thing just got in my head, and I lost sight of what was really important. But I've realized that having a relationship with my father is worth more than any amount of money. We talked for about an hour, and by the end of the conversation, Emma had convinced me that she was being sincere. She apologized for the things she had said when she left my house, she acknowledged that she had treated both me and her grandmother badly, and she seemed genuinely interested in making amends. The wedding is in 4 months, she said. I know it's a lot to ask, but would you consider walking me down the aisle? I know I don't deserve it, but it would mean everything to me to have my father there on the most important day of my life. I was so moved by her apparent change of heart that I agreed to attend the wedding. We made plans to meet for dinner the following week to start rebuilding our relationship gradually. But something has been nagging at me since that phone call. The timing seems awfully convenient. Emma reaches out with this heartfelt apology just a few days after her mother visits me to plead for financial help. Part of me wonders if this is all just another strategy to get back in my good graces so that I'll eventually change my mind about the inheritance. I want to believe that my daughter has genuinely matured and wants to repair our relationship. But I've been burned by her once already, and I can't shake the feeling that this might be a more sophisticated manipulation than her first attempt. Update 3. I've been going back and forth about whether to post this update, but I need to get this off my chest because I feel like an idiot. I went to dinner with Emma last week, and everything seemed to be going well. She was apologetic, she asked thoughtful questions about my life, and she seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship. We talked about her job, her fiancé, and her plans for the future. It felt like the kind of conversation I had been hoping to have with my daughter for 8 years. But then, toward the end of the meal, she brought up the inheritance again. Dad, I know I messed up how I approached this before, she said carefully. But I've been thinking about what Grandma would have wanted. Do you really think she would have wanted all her money to go unused? She was always so generous, always talking about how she wanted to help family. I felt my heart sink. Here we go again. Emma, we've been through this, I said. Your grandmother changed her will because. I know, she interrupted. Because I wasn't there for her. And I accept responsibility for that. But don't you think she would have wanted me to have at least some of her money to start my married life? Especially now that we're rebuilding our relationship? I realized in that moment that nothing had changed. Emma wasn't interested in having a father, she was interested in having an inheritance. This whole reconciliation was just a more patient, long-term strategy to get what she wanted. Emma, I said quietly, are you here because you want a relationship with me, or because you want your grandmother's money? She looked panicked, like she realized she had overplayed her hand. Both, she said quickly. I want both. Can I want to have my father back and also feel like I deserve what Grandma always promised me? No, I said. You can't. Because the money isn't yours, and your grandmother made it clear that she didn't want you to have it. Emma's mask slipped completely then. She was sick, Dad. She wasn't thinking clearly. That will doesn't represent what she really wanted. She changed the will 3 years before she died, I reminded her. And she was completely lucid when she did it. This is ridiculous, Emma snapped. You're keeping money that should be mine just to punish me. That's not what family does to each other. You're right, I agreed. That's not what family does to each other. Family doesn't abandon each other for 8 years. Family doesn't ignore dying grandmothers. Family doesn't reach out only when they want something. Emma stared at me for a moment, and then she said something that told me everything I needed to know about who she really was. Fine, she said coldly. If you're not going to do the right thing and give me what I deserve, then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about. Don't expect to hear from me again. And just like that, she was gone again. Not because I had wronged her, but because I refused to give her money that wasn't hers. I'm not even hurt this time. I'm just disappointed in myself for falling for her act, even briefly. Emma is exactly who she showed me she was the first time, someone who views relationships as transactional and who believes she's entitled to things she hasn't earned. I'm done hoping for a reconciliation that will never happen. My daughter made her choice 8 years ago, and she's been making the same choice ever since. I'm finally ready to accept that and move on with my life. The inheritance will go to charity when I die. It's what my mother would have wanted, her money being used to help people who actually need it, rather than funding the entitled demands of someone who couldn't be bothered to visit her in her final years. I'm sad that this is how the story ends, but I'm also relieved to finally know where I stand. No more false hope, no more manipulation, no more wondering if my daughter will ever grow up. This is who she is, and I'm finally okay with accepting that reality.